Hey, what's up, everybody? How you doing? My name is Marcus, and I would like to welcome you to episode 2 of Let Me Excel. This is my response. This is my lament. This is my plea for biblical justice, for biblical love, and for biblical accountability. Yes, biblical accountability, especially for us within the body of Christ. But before I have to say what I have to say, and we're going to dive into the word in 1 John chapter 3, do a quick study in there. I feel like it's important for you to know who I am. So before you hear what I have to say, you must know the who of what I am. And so let me tell you about myself. Like I said, my name is Marcus. I was born in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, Eglin Air Force Base specifically. My father is a military man. He did 28 years in the Air Force. And I grew up in a predominantly white society because that was the demographic of Fort Walton Beach. And in the time I was there, it was a great, I loved being in Fort Walton. It was amazing. There were amazing people in Fort Walton, very loving, a very kind community. And I just really enjoyed being there. But one thing that was interesting about Fort Walton was the fact that I really didn't see a lot of people, especially within my school, that looked like me. I remember looking at the yearbook, and you can count, I think it was like 106 people within my third grade class, and 4 of us were people of color, 2 of us, and 2 of them were mixed. And so it really wasn't a vast representation. And I remember, and I never was really hit with what you would call explicit racism. And so it wasn't like a horrible experience. However, I did recognize something. I recognized that I wasn't like everybody else. And to me, that did something. It did something to me because I recognized that I wasn't like everybody else. And I also recognized that I necessarily wasn't treated like everybody else. And the perfect culmination of when everything kind of came to a head in the 3rd grade, we used to write journal entries in our English class, or our English period, if you will. And Friday was a free journal entry day. And this one particular Friday, I wrote a journal entry, and it was entitled this: I hate that I'm black. I hate that I'm black. Y'all, this was in the 3rd grade. 3rd grade. And I wrote a journal entry entitled, I hate that I'm black. But Marcus, if you were never hit with or expressed with explicit racism, then why did you hate that you were black? I hated that I was black because I recognized that I wasn't treated like everybody else. I recognized that even if I did certain things, that it just didn't necessarily measure up. I always saw myself as less than, because the thing I knew about being an African American, I only saw in textbooks and I only saw in media. And those were very damaging things because I reckon, and this is another thing I recognized. I recognized I didn't have hair like everybody else. And when we had to go through getting tests, that I just didn't get treated like everybody else. I recognized that none of the girls ever had crushes on me. I recognized that whenever we would play house, and when I mean play house in kindergarten and in 1st grade and 3rd grade, you act like you're a family within like recess or something. So you have a person that's the father of the house, you have a person that's a mother, and then you have children's and uncles and everything. And it's just a very lighthearted game. But I was always good enough to be the son. I was always good enough to be even the brother or the uncle. But I was never chosen. I was never good enough to be the ultimate leader within that group, also known as the father. It was never me. And so I recognized that. I recognized that the history that I know about people with my skin tone is that they were slaves and that they were oppressed. And I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to be like everybody else. And so that breeded in me a quiet disdain for who I was as a young boy. And that was painful. But I didn't really recognize that And I didn't really recognize the beauty of my skin. I just recognized that I was different. Fast forward a little bit, from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade, there was a huge culture shift. In 2001, my father got orders, and we ended up moving to Montgomery, Alabama. So I go from a predominantly white society to a predominantly white environment to a predominantly black environment, and it was crazy. And so I was hit with this culture shock, if you will. Because I remember specifically going to the park, and I was a very good athlete as a kid. So that was our saving grace. And just like a lot of African American children, your saving grace is athletics. That's another story for another day. But so we would I would go to the park and play football and basketball, and I'd meet some of the other kids. And when I would begin to talk, they would look at me weird because I didn't talk like them. I had zero concept of slang. I remember this one time, this young boy, he invited me over to his house. He said, "Oh man, I got this new goal, and it has a glass backboard. Man, that mug is clean." And I looked at him and said, "Oh, I bet it is." And he just looked at me really funny because he knew I didn't understand the term clean. I was thinking clean as in like Windex, and he meant clean as like it is really nice. And I remember being looked at kind of weird until I began to recognize what black culture is. And not saying that if you don't understand slang, or if you don't, act a certain way or dress a certain way, that you're not black. It just means that I began to appreciate the beauty of culture. I began to appreciate the beauty of my skin. And it is in Montgomery where I began to see the beauty of the civil rights movement. If you know civil rights, you know Montgomery. The thing about Montgomery that's really weird, and I would challenge you, go look it up. I might see if I can put a picture of it. If you look at the seal, the Great Seal of Montgomery, you will see in the middle of it, there is a star. And it says in there, the cradle of Confederacy. But in the outer ring, it says the birthplace of civil rights. Montgomery is just like that. And I had the opportunity to grow up in a place that was the birthplace of civil rights, but at the same time, the safe haven, the cradle of Confederacy. But it's also about who you surround yourself with, because I had the opportunity to meet some brothers and sisters, some white men and some white women and kids that truly understood what it means to be black in America, that truly understood the severity and the weight of civil rights, and they truly understood the weight of the actions of their ancestors and what that does in systemic racism. A key example of that, I had to shout them out, are the Horns. They were my associate pastors of the church that I was attending to, and man, Pastor Horn, Elder Shannon, I love you all, and they had a heart for people. Despite skin color, despite what they see, I knew that when I looked into those blue eyes of Pastor Horn, that he saw me as a young man. He didn't see me as a skin tone. And I love them. And those are people that I had the opportunity to encounter. And so I come up with this appreciation for black culture, appreciation of my blackness, and understood and became aware that I really wasn't like everybody else. But I began to appreciate it a little more. And so even then, people ask me, what is it like to grow up in Montgomery? Because I'm currently living in Texas. So people that find out, that's like, what is it like to grow up in Montgomery? Like, did you get hit with a lot of racism? And I say, you know what? It's the same amount as being in Texas. It's just the fact that in Texas, you have the Latinos, you have your brown brothers and sisters you can kind of share the load with. But another day, another story, we'll talk about that. So fast forwarding to becoming a young man. I go off to college and I go to a predominantly white institution. So I leave this predominantly black black environment, and then I go to another predominantly white environment in Auburn University. It is at Auburn that I really began to notice more so and be reminded of the fact that I am black in America. There are a couple of instances and a couple of experiences and stories that I would like to share with you. And I can tell you this is going to be uncomfortable, but I remember a couple stories. This is one, I graduated with a degree in industrial design, graduated summa cum laude, and I made sure I did that. This is the reason why I made sure I graduated. And I was the only person within my graduating class that graduated in summa cum laude, the only person. And this is why that had to happen. When in the beginning of the program, to get into this particular major of industrial design, you go through a session called Summer Rock. In the beginning of Summer Rock, you have to go to this one particular big bookstore. And I went to this bookstore. You have to buy it's like $500 to $600 worth of supplies in order to get through the program, so you can have the necessary tools to do the projects. And so I went there. It was about 100 plus people in there because everybody's trying to get their supplies at the same time. And so I get my stuff, and then I have this big black bag like everybody else, and all the supplies is in there. And so I'm walking out the door, and I get stopped. This older white gentleman, which I found out later was the owner of this particular bookstore, he stopped me. He said, "Hey, did you pay for that?" I paused, and I looked at him. And I looked down at my bag, and he repeated and said, "Hey, did you pay for that?" And I said, "Yeah, I paid for it." "What do you mean?" He said, "Okay, if you paid for it, let me see your receipt." So in that moment, I had to go open the bag and get my receipt, and I had to show it to him, and he said, "Okay, you can go now." And I paused for a second because in this interaction, I'm seeing young men and young women that don't necessarily have my skin complexion that walk by without any resistance, any second look. But when I walked by, he had to ask if I paid for it. I'm talking about being black in America. Another instance that actually happened outside of that bookstore, probably about a year or two later, is I was walking to get more supplies because this is the only place that you can get supplies at Auburn, especially for this. So I was walking to that bookstore to get some stuff. And then there was this young family that was approaching me. There was a little bit of construction going on along the sidewalk. But, regulations, you have to have room for multiple people to pass on the sidewalk. And so I was walking, and I had my sweats on, t-shirt, probably had a hat on, and some Nikes on. Typical college student, get up. Nothing abrasive or anything like that. Wasn't sagging or anything like that. So I was walking, and then I saw this family approaching, didn't think anything of it. And the kids began to walk, and then I noticed the man, grabbed the little child back, and they grabbed their children, and they kind of put their children behind them, and then they turned their backs and almost like cradled the children. At the time, I was like, I didn't think anything of it. So I continued to walk, and I walked by, and then as I walked by, I hear them say, "Okay, it's safe now, we can go." I stopped, and I paused, and I said to myself, "What?" I was getting ready to turn around and say something, but I thought to myself, man, what's the use? So I just dropped my head, I picked it back up, and I resumed walking. I'm talking about being black in America. There's one more instance that I have to say. I found out that one of my homeboys, a good friend of mine, when I was living in Fort Walton, I found out that he was now going to the university. And so we ended up connecting, and I invited him out to this Bible study that I was a part of, and a men's Bible study. And so I was like, "Hey man, you should come kick it with us. We're going to be in the student center. Let's do it." So he was all down for it, and he said he was going to meet us. And so I was like, cool. So time rolls around, I'm chilling in the student center, and I got a couple guys around me, and we are waiting, and we're about to get started, and in the student center, and I look and I see him, and we look at each other, we lock eyes, and I throw my hand up, to say, "Hey man, what's up? We're over here." And then when he locked eyes with me, he began to throw his hand up and had a smile, but then it's like in that same instance, he realized who was around me. And when you try to wave at somebody, but you realize you're waving at the wrong person or something like that, you're like, "Hey, you just do one of those numbers." And so that's what he did. He was like, "Hey, and then Then he began walking and continued to walk in the direction that he was going in. And I knew he saw me. And one of my homeboys looked at me and was like, "Hey man, isn't that your boy?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's him." Because in that moment, I realized why he kept on walking. It's because I was surrounded by about 7 to 8 other black young men. And I know he was here to see us because he had his Bible in his hand. And in that moment, I also realized, yo, this is what it's like. Like this is really real. I don't feel like he had any racial, he's racist. I know he wasn't racist because we used to be best friends, but I know that something happened between being a kid and becoming a young adult, that there had to be something where he felt uncomfortable being around a bunch of black men. I know he saw us because even if he claimed he didn't see us, if you are looking for somebody, wouldn't you say, "Hey man," shoot a text or a message, say, "Hey man, I was looking for you, but I didn't see you. Hey, where were y'all at? Can we link up again?" I never heard from him again. That was the last time I spoke to him. I could talk about experience after experience, but I'm telling you, I'm numb to it. And no, I'm not talking about somebody calling me the N-word. And no, I'm not talking about even a police officer detaining me or searching me. But we all know that all these are real stories. I'm trying to tell you my story because what I know is that over the course of my lifetime, that it has been hard to be a black man because I had to fight to have value in my identity because I'm recognized that people don't see, respect, or even love me the same way because of the skin that I have. And it has been a struggle, and especially when you talk to people within the Christian faith, of white evangelicalism and what that has done, the whitewashing of Christianity. Because I have seen young men and young women of color turn away from the gospel, to turn away from Christianity and pursue things outside of that, these pseudo-Christianities, or going to Muslim or Hebrew Israelites, whatever it is. And the reason that they go is because the Christian church, the American Christian church, has never affirmed the identity of the black man and the black woman. And even when we come to situations like these, we see silence. We see silence or affirmation or just straight out passivity. And so this is my challenge for people who are raising young men, young women, especially people of color. I want to challenge you that you make sure you talk to your children about race. Because if you try to raise them in color blindness, the only thing that they may not recognize their color, but they will recognize their difference. They will recognize their difference. Make sure you surround them about black heroes that aren't just athletes. Because the saving grace of a black man is not how good he dribbles a basketball or runs a football, or how good he sings or performs or raps. The essence and the beauty of a black man comes because he is made in the identity of Jesus. He is made in the identity of God. The Bible says that we were formed in his image. The imago Dei is important for us to uphold and value. And so I say, please make sure you are affirming your children. You tell them they are beautiful. You tell them they are unique. And you tell them that they are made in the image of God. To my white brothers and sisters that are raising young children, I want you to tell your children that people like this, people who are dark, that sometimes people treat them less. Let's call it what it is. Like sometimes people will treat people that don't look like us as less than, or they'll treat them wrong. But guess what? You have to be a young man to stand up for them. You have to be those to love them, because guess what? Just like you're beautiful, just like you're made in God's image, so are they. They are made in God's image. I would challenge you, buy black dolls for your children and see what it's been like for years. Buy and support black businesses. support, because this is the thing. I'm not talking about abandoning who you are and even abandoning your culture. I'm talking about seeing us and seeing everybody as equals. I'm talking about upholding the image of God in the Imago Dei and loving each other as Christ has called us. Because John, I can't wait to jump into this. First John, he goes in on people who say they love or uphold to a faith in Jesus Christ, but they have disdain or hatred in their hearts. And he goes as far as to say that they are not of us at all. But we're going to talk about that in our next episode, in episode 3. And so I want you to know that this is my experience. And experiences like this and so many more are felt within Black men and Black women. And if you are not a person of color and you seek to understand, I challenge you to have a conversation. Don't call me because, this is my conversation. So, but if you want to call me, we can, cool, whatever. But I just want to shed light. The only reason I'm doing this is not shame. I don't want you to go into white guilt. I don't want anybody to even become infuriated with who or how God has made them in the ethnic group that they may belong to. I want you to have a value and appreciation for people that don't look like you, and also for your own self, because God has made you in his image, and that is what you need to know. That's what I needed to know. And praise God that he has made me know this now. And so I have the privilege of knowing men and women that don't look like me, and I love them, whether they're white, whether they're Latino, whether they're Asian. I want everybody to have an appreciation of who God made them to be. And I also want that same appreciation and love to be extended to your neighbor, for that people that don't look like you, and let them know that you are made in God's image, and you do everything you can to make sure that as your vertical relationship, I'm going to the next episode, but as your vertical relationship with God is solidified and you hold on to that you also have a horizontal expression, because a cross is just two separate planes if they're not put together. You have to have both in order to uphold to the beauty of the cross. To have one without the other is to have nothing at all. But you can read 1 John. He'll tell you about that. And so we're going to jump into that next episode. And so I appreciate you. If you listen to this 20+ minute episode, I appreciate you for staying with me. And I appreciate you for hearing my heart. And I want to challenge you to love as Christ called us to love, to appreciate the beauty of who God has made you. Black men and Black women, you are affirmed. Brown men and brown women, you are affirmed. And even white men and white women, you are affirmed. But you are also challenged. We are also challenged to love as Christ called us to love. So I appreciate you. I can't wait to jump into our next episode. And we are maybe some bonus footage, so you want to make sure you take in. But episode 3 is coming, and we're going to begin our study in 1 John chapter 3 and see what John has to say to us. So I love you. I thank you. And we about to get to it. One love.